Although I have created the VMs, I have not logged into the VMs as such because I want to do it in a little bit different way. So this is what my current architecture is, right? This is how my current deployment is. I have a virtual network created in central India. There's a public subnet and there's a private subnet inside of this VNet. There's a Bastion subnet also. The reason there's a Bastion subnet because I had created a Bastion host automatically. And in the previous video, I have launched two virtual machines, one in the public subnet and other in the private subnet. The Bastion host is already there in the Bastion subnet. Now what will I do is that this is my laptop. I'll try to log into these virtual machines from my laptop. I do not need any SSH key because the authentication type is password based. The name of the user is 3IAM user. So I'll be using my laptop to connect to the VM in public subnet and the VM in private subnet. To connect to the VM in public subnet would be pretty straightforward. I'll just use the user ID and the password and that's it. But I cannot log into the VM in private subnet directly because first of all, there is no public IP address. So what I have to do is that I'll have to use the Bastion host to connect to the VM in the private subnet. Let's first try to connect to the VM in the public subnet, which is 3IAM public VM. Okay, so first of all, let's try to understand what these things are. So after you create the VM, these are the options that you can see. It can tell you or give you the public IP option. This is the public IP. It will also tell you the VNet where you have created the VM. Then we have various other properties of the VM. And here you can see the network settings also, what network settings we have used, or this is the network interface rather. And here you can get the network interface option, the virtual network, the public IP address, the private IP address, the network security group. I have not enabled load balancing. I have not provided any application security group. Then I can go to settings, and in the settings, I can see the disk option. So what disk is associated with it, what is the operating system, what configuration I have used. So now I'll have to connect to this virtual machine which is in public subnet. So you have this connect option here. If you select, there are two options, connect and connect via Bastion. So as it is in the public subnet and I have allowed SSH access from internet, I'll connect from my laptop. So the first option is that it will ask you to use a Bastion host. The reason it is asking you to use a Bastion host because that is the best practice. And if you click here, more ways to connect, it will show you all the other ways that you can use. One is the native SSH, which is shell connection. Then you can use the SSH using Azure CLI. You remember this is the Azure CLI console which can be used, or Cloud Shell. We can use this button to launch Cloud Shell and use Azure CLI. Or you can use the serial console from Azure portal and then remote desktop protocol. And if you click on Bastion here, it will show you the Bastion host which is ready. So let us try to connect using native SSH. If you click on this, it will give you the public IP address, which is the public IP address. And if you scroll down, this is the command that we'll have to run because we'll be connecting via password, not private key. So copy this and go to the terminal that we have. So this is the same command, type yes here. We'll have to provide the password, and if everything is right, I should be able to log into the VM, and which I'm able to log in. There are nothing here. I do not have any files or anything as such. I can create a directory like this and do an LSL. So the directory has been created. So we were able to log in to the VM which is there in the public subnet. Remember that we had associated network security group also. Now before connecting to the private VM, let's look at the network security group one more time, which I had associated with the private subnet and the VM also that I had just launched. And in the private subnet, I have not enabled anything, only the virtual network. That's it, nothing else is there. In the public NSG, I had allowed access, SSH access from internet. Okay, so now let's go to the VM, which is this private VM, and let's try to connect. Now, there are two options. I can either directly connect or I can use a Bastion option. I'm using the same direct connect, and let's try to connect via SSH. And if I use this option SSH 3IAM user at 10.0.24, I'll not be able to do so because this is a private IP. This is not a public IP address. This is a private IP address. First of all, I'll not be able to connect itself. So it has been some time. There's no response, which means that we will not be able to connect to it. So to connect to this VM, which is in private subnet, I'll connect via bashan. And it takes me to the same bashan console. And the authentication type would be VM password. The username is 3am user and the password is whatever password you have provided. Let's try to connect. So this is some problem. The pop-up blocker is there. So let me enable pop-up blocker. That's my bad. Done. Let's try to connect. So now I'm connected to the private VM you see here using the bashan host. It is not the public VM. This is the private VM, which I was not able to connect from my laptop, but I'm able to connect using the bashan host. So this is how you can use bashan host, private subnet, public subnet, laptop, SSH or password based authentication to connect to different VMs. And this is where I conclude the Azure VM section.